The story begins inside one of Spain's most brutal prisons, a place where inmates were treated like animals rather than human beings. Years of cruelty finally pushed the prisoners to their limit, and their leader, Malamander, along with his men, launched a violent uprising against the system. Right in the middle of this chaos, a new guard named Oliver arrived at the prison. His official duty was supposed to start the next day, but eager to impress his seniors, he showed up a day early. What he didn't know was that this decision would nearly cost him his life. The moment Malamander noticed the keys hanging from the guard's hand, everything exploded into action. A large section of the ceiling collapsed and slammed directly onto Oliver's head, knocking him down. Malamander had secretly hidden a thin steel wire in his mouth, which he used to silently unlock his handcuffs. He then provoked a guard nearby, and as soon as the man stepped close, Malamander strangled him using the cuffs themselves. Oliver wasn't alone. Another guard was with him and quickly dragged Oliver's unconscious body into an empty cell, cell 211. By then, Oliver had already passed out. Meanwhile, the rebellion spiraled completely out of control. Prisoners broke open locks, took over corridors, and fires erupted everywhere. The entire prison descended into chaos. Oliver's colleague hesitated, unsure whether to try escaping with him. But the other guard warned that if they ran with Oliver, they would be caught and beaten to death by the inmates. Left with no choice, they abandoned him inside the cell. Though unconscious, Oliver was surrounded by screams, violence, and destruction echoing throughout the prison. From the control room, the prison director watched everything unfold through the CCTV system. Helpless and confused, all he could do was observe and try to understand what Malamander truly wanted. A short while later, one of Malamander's men reached Oliver's cell. Seeing an unfamiliar face inside, he slapped Oliver hard, snapping him awake. Still dazed and disoriented, Oliver couldn't respond properly to the inmates' questions. Frustrated, the man locked the cell and left. It didn't take long for Oliver to realize that a full-scale riot was underway, and that he was trapped inside a cell with no protection. Acting quickly, he flushed his shoelaces down the toilet, hid his belt under the mattress, and threw his wallet away as well. He knew that when new inmates arrive, these items are usually taken from them. He was just about to remove his wedding ring when the cell door opened again. This time, Malamander's man had come to take him directly to the leader. Standing in front of Malamander, Oliver stayed calm. He confidently pulled out a cigarette, returned the pack, and casually explained that he had just arrived at the prison that day. He claimed the head injury came from being beaten by guards. Not once did he show fear. At first, Malamander was suspicious. Oliver looked too innocent, like someone who had never harmed anyone in his life. But Oliver responded with attitude, snapping back and asking if Malamander thought he was a fortune teller who could read a man's past just by looking at his face. That arrogance caught Malamander off guard and earned his respect. Still wanting confirmation, Malamander ordered Oliver to drop his pants. Confused, but aware his life depended on it, Oliver complied. This unexpected moment saved him. Prisoners were not allowed to wear underwear, and by pure coincidence, Oliver didn't wear any. With that, Malamander's doubts disappeared. As the riot continued, prisoners began smashing the security cameras. Oliver knew that if every camera was destroyed, his only connection to the outside world would be gone. He shouted for everyone to stop. The inmates turned toward him as he explained that at least one camera should remain so their demands could be broadcast outside. If they didn't want staff watching, they could simply cover it. Malamander agreed with the idea. To earn even more trust, Oliver volunteered to cover the cameras himself. Carefully and slowly, he climbed up and placed cloth over one camera, making sure his face was clearly visible. In the control room, staff immediately recognized him as one of their guards. From that moment on, only Oliver and the people in the control room knew the truth. Inside the prison, he was officially just another inmate. Even after all this, Malamander still had some doubts. He took Oliver to the injured guard who'd been carrying the keys and asked him directly if Oliver was the same guard who had beaten him earlier. The moment Oliver and the guard looked at each other, they both understood that this was a life or death situation. Without hesitation, both denied recognizing one another. Even so, Malamander's men continued beating the guard mercilessly. Around the same time, the prison director finally called in the special forces for help. A tactical team quickly surrounded the prison and took their positions outside. Their orders were simple. Only 2 guards were being held hostage. None of the prisoners' demands were to be accepted, and the operation was to begin immediately to retake control of the prison. But then, a shocking update changed everything. 3 extremely important political prisoners were still inside the prison and had not yet been transferred. On top of that, the media had already learned about the riot. The entire country's attention was now focused on this prison. These 3 inmates were powerful political figures, and if anything happened to them, nationwide unrest would break out. Malamander had already secured all 3 hostages and made sure the prison administration knew it through the CCTV system. With those high-profile prisoners under his control, the inmates' power power increased dramatically. The prisoners celebrated, confident they now held the upper hand. Sitting in the control room, the prison director realized the situation had gone far beyond control. A negotiator was immediately brought in to speak with the prisoners. Malamander's past record was reviewed. 10 years earlier, he had led another riot in which a guard was killed. Since then, he had ruled the prison as its undisputed boss. Malamander asked Oliver to help him write down their demands. The demands themselves were basic: improve the living conditions in the cells, allow family visits once every 15 days, and provide proper medical treatment in real hospitals. He explained that doctors usually examined prisoners through the bars, and because of that negligence, a prisoner with a brain tumor had once been told he was faking pain. That man later died in agony. Oliver found nothing unreasonable in these demands. Watching Malamander lead his people with confidence and purpose impressed him. During their conversation, Oliver shared that his wife was pregnant and that his child would be born while he was trapped inside the prison. Malamander felt genuine sympathy upon hearing this. Oliver then invented a backstory, claiming the man he had killed was a drug dealer who murdered his younger brother, and that he had only taken revenge. This made Malamander feel even more compassion toward him. Slowly but surely, Oliver was gaining Malamander's trust. By this point, the negotiator had arrived inside the prison. Malamander ordered Oliver to search him. While doing so, Oliver cleverly revealed the location of the 3 political hostages without raising suspicion. After that, Malamander presented his demands to the negotiator. The negotiator said he would take the demands to his superiors and return with a response. Before letting him leave, Malamander added that his men had been working hard all day and were hungry. He demanded proper food. He also insisted that Oliver be allowed to speak with his pregnant wife. The negotiator agreed, saying he could arrange the call and would personally escort Oliver out and bring him back safely. Malamander accepted this, but firmly warned that nothing must happen to Oliver. By now, Malamander trusted him almost completely. For Oliver, this was the perfect opportunity. But just as the gate was about to open, a loud scream echoed from inside the prison. Instantly, Malamander grabbed the negotiator and ordered Oliver to find out what had happened. Oliver rushed over and discovered that 2 inmates had gotten into a fight. One of them had suffered a head injury and was unconscious. Watching the CCTV feed, the Special Forces commander assumed someone important had been killed and immediately ordered his team to launch the assault. Oliver realized at once that if the Special Forces entered now, the prison would turn into a bloodbath. Acting fast, he brought the 3 political hostages directly in front of a surveillance camera so the commander could clearly see that they were alive and unharmed. The moment the commander saw them on the CCTV screens, he ordered the attack to stop. Negotiations resumed once again. Oliver's intelligence and courage had saved countless lives. But deep down, Malamander couldn't fully digest the fact that this man had arrived at the prison just today and was already being treated like a hero. Oliver sensed this immediately and understood one thing clearly. This was not the time to look like the hero. In front of everyone, he raised Malamander's hand and loudly said that everything he had done was on the boss's orders. The inmates erupted in celebration, lifting both men onto their shoulders. Later, Malamander pulled Oliver aside and warned him quietly. He told him he had done a great job, but if he ever acted on his own again without permission, there would be consequences. Meanwhile, false news somehow spread through the media claiming that the 3 political leaders had been killed and that several others were injured. At the same time, Oliver's wife Elena was eating at a restaurant when she saw the breaking news on television. The prison where her husband worked was suddenly all over every news channel. Panic took over. She tried calling Oliver repeatedly, but his phone was unreachable. After many attempts, she finally spoke to one of Oliver's colleagues, who told her that Oliver was on duty at another branch and that his phone was likely off because of work. But Elena knew something was wrong. Without wasting time, she got into her car and drove straight to the prison. By then, many prisoners' families had already gathered outside. Everyone was desperate for information, just wanting to know if their loved ones were alive. Elena pushed through the crowd asking about Oliver, but no one gave her a clear answer. Inside the prison, Malamander was eating with his men while Oliver listened closely to stories from Malamander's past. Suddenly, the inmate who had caused the earlier fight appeared. Malamander immediately confronted him and punished him harshly, blaming him for nearly ruining the entire plan and putting everyone's lives at risk. During this distraction, Oliver saw his chance. He quietly took the walkie-talkie from Malamander's chair. His worry for Elena was growing by the second. Using the device, he contacted a colleague and asked him to reassure Elena that he was safe. His colleague replied that they had already spoken to her and that everything was under control. Soon after, Malamander and his men watched the protests unfolding outside on the prison televisions. Families were shouting, chaos was spreading, moving, and cameras captured every moment. Malamander decided it was time to negotiate again, but when he reached for his walkie-talkie, it was gone. His men searched everywhere, but it had vanished. Just then, Oliver returned and calmly handed it over, explaining that he had secured it to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. His reasoning made sense, and no one questioned him. However, from the balcony above, Apache had seen everything. Apache quickly went to his room, pulled out a hidden phone from a small metal box, and contacted a guard he knew. Apache was secretly an informant working for the prison authorities. Through this call, he learned Oliver's true identity. Outside the prison, the crowd grew angrier. Stones were thrown at the guard office. Utrilla, already fueled by rage, completely lost control. He gathered a group of guards armed with batons and ordered them to charge the crowd. People were beaten indiscriminately. Inside, Oliver suddenly saw Elena on the television screen, scared, standing in the crowd. Furious and terrified, he grabbed the walkie-talkie and confronted his colleague, shouting that he had promised everything was arranged. If that was true, why was his wife there? Only then did the authorities realize the media was broadcasting everything live, allowing prisoners to see their families on TV. Immediately, the prison cut the television signal throughout the facility. Outside, the protests turned even more violent. Elena felt sharp pain in her stomach as the crowd surged. Amid the chaos, Utrilla struck her with a baton. She collapsed to the ground. The cameras captured it all. Inside the prison, the blackout only fueled the inmates' anger. Malamander demanded a list of the injured over the walkie-talkie. When Oliver asked specifically about his wife, the authorities lied and claimed everyone was fine. At that moment, Apache approached Oliver and threatened him. He warned that if Oliver didn't cooperate, he would expose his true identity to everyone. But Oliver was no longer afraid. He turned the threat back on him, calmly stating that he was a guard who had arrived today, and people might forgive that deception. But Apache had been betraying the inmates for years. That revelation shocked Apache completely. Outside, Utrilla was officially suspended. The paperwork stated he had injured civilians during the protest, though in reality the authorities were protecting him. Back inside, Malamander and Oliver discussed what would happen next. Malamander promised to take full responsibility and told Oliver to say he had only acted under pressure. That way, Oliver's punishment would be lighter, and he could return to his wife and unborn child sooner. Just then, the prison authorities finally sent over the list of the injured. Malamander opened the list. It contained only 4 injured names. The moment he saw it, he understood that the management was lying to them. Rage exploded inside him. He said this was no longer enough and that something drastic had to be done. He decided that one of the 3 hostages would be killed. Oliver immediately stopped him. He warned that if they killed a hostage, the authorities would storm the prison and massacre everyone inside. Instead, Oliver suggested another option. They would cut off a small piece of one hostage's ear. That would send a clear message without crossing the final line. Since the idea came from Oliver, the responsibility fell on him. He finished the job quickly, trying to minimize the pain. Shortly after, the severed ear was delivered to the prison management. Now, they had no choice. The real list had to be sent. When Oliver read it, his heart shattered. His pregnant wife, Elena, was on that list. At the same time, Apache gathered more information from outside. A video surfaced clearly showing Utrilla beating Elena. Oliver watched the clip again and again. With every replay, his anger grew stronger. Inside the prison, he was risking his life to save everyone. Outside, his wife had been brutally assaulted, and his own colleagues had lied to him. Overwhelmed by rage, Oliver demanded that Utrilla be sent inside immediately. With the lives of the political hostages at stake, management had no leverage. They sent Utrilla in alone. The moment he entered, Malamander held him at knife point and dragged him away from the cameras. Oliver asked about Elena, but Utrilla stayed silent. When Oliver showed him the video, Utrilla looked away. That was the final straw. Oliver snapped. He beat Utrilla mercilessly. He was no longer thinking clearly. He grabbed the walkie-talkie and demanded to speak to his wife. The truth finally came out. Elena and the unborn child were both dead. Oliver collapsed. He rested his head on Malamander's shoulder and cried uncontrollably. Malamander ordered the others to beat Utrilla together. But before they could act, Utrilla screamed the truth in desperation. Oliver was a prison guard. The inmates froze in shock. Oliver didn't care anymore. Nothing mattered now. He killed Utrilla in front of everyone. With his family gone, his will to live had vanished. He walked silently back to cell 211. He pulled out the belt he had hidden earlier and tried to end his life, but even that failed. When he woke up, he noticed words carved into the wall, written by a previous prisoner who had died from unbearable pain. Oliver realized that pain now belonged to him. He left his old identity behind and truly became an inmate of cell 211. Some prisoners still suspected him, but Malamander knew the truth. Guard or not, Oliver now belonged to them. Their fates were tied together. After the list was revealed, the prisoners' anger intensified. Seeing their families hurt pushed them beyond control. The government stepped in and sent a high-level official to negotiate. He announced that most demands had been accepted. As he spoke, Oliver dragged Utrilla's body into view and dropped it in front of the cameras. Looking straight ahead, Oliver admitted he was the one who killed him. Then he made their final demand clear. The Prime Minister himself must appear on television and publicly confirm that all conditions were accepted. Oliver had fully joined the inmates. Malamander stood with him. Fulfill the demands, or come collect bodies. The negotiator reported everything upward. Malamander knew the government would never surrender easily. He ordered the hostages moved to separate locations and prepared everyone for the final battle. Then the authorities played their dirtiest move. They informed Malamander that Oliver was indeed a guard and promised to reduce Malamander's sentence if he killed him. When Malamander reviewed Oliver's file, he was shaken, but he stayed true to his path. He approached Oliver with a knife, but when he looked into Oliver's eyes, he didn't see a guard. He saw a broken man filled with loyalty and pain. Malamander handed him the knife instead and said they would fight together. At the same time, Apache betrayed them. He revealed the hostages' real locations to the authorities. Special forces launched the assault. The prison television suddenly turned back on. News channels announced that all old prison laws had been abolished. Oliver and Malamander felt hope for the first time, but it was a trap. The announcement was meant to calm the inmates. As celebrations began, Apache made his move. He killed the inmates guarding the hostages and positioned himself as their protector. Oliver understood instantly. He told Malamander the hostages had to be killed or everything would be lost. But before they could act, Oliver was struck by a nail gun. The wound was fatal. Malamander rushed to him, knowing there was nothing to be done. Apache shouted that both leaders were dead. Hearing this, the inmates surrendered. Malamander stood frozen, watching everything collapse. As he wiped his tears, Apache shot him from behind. Malamander fell but tried to fight back. Apache fired again. Malamander was finished. Special forces regained full control of the prison. Oliver died moments later, writhing in pain. After it was all over, one of Oliver's colleagues came to identify his body. Ashamed, he opened the door to cell 211. Inside, he found only a ring. Oliver had been an honest, good man, but society had taken everything from him. In the end, he chose not to live as a guard, but to die as a prisoner. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. I'll see you in the next one.